Hey, welcome to the show, Leading and Growing Your Real Estate Business. This is Coach James Short, aka Shorty. And this is a show for those within the real estate industry wanting to lead and grow their real estate business. It's a series of interviews that we conduct for those within the industry. So we're finding out what those leaders are within the industry, what makes them tick, what's their story, what are their strategies, and how to become the leaders and the growers within the industry. But also it's an interview series with those outside of the industry. I'm always a big believer of looking at a whole different part of the pie rather than just focusing on one part of the pie. Because what it does, it allows you to have a different perspective, allows you to get snippets or golden nuggets from those outside of the industry that can look in the industry and go, there's a different perspective. And so I encourage you to reach out to the guests. I encourage you to lean into these series to find out how can these pieces of information, experiences, stories help you lead and grow your real estate business. And before we get underway with our latest episode, just a little shout out to these amazing crew at Magic Mind. Magic Mind has been it's a productivity hit in the bottle. I've been using these supplementations now for a number of weeks, and the clarity, the focus, and the performance that I've been getting from these nutrients in a bottle. They've got amazing vitamins, amazing minerals. They've got a bunch of mushrooms in there as well. It's a great productivity hack that I've been using every single day. So if you want to try it out, head on over to www.magicmind.com/James Short, and you'll be able to get amazing discounts when you subscribe and when you try the product. And at the checkout, simply add in James Short 20 to get your discount. So head on over, Magic Mind, productivity in a bottle. Oh, I love it. Now, on with the show. I've got an interesting topic here that we're going to be talking about. And I've got a good friend, mentor, legend, Alan Stevens today to jump on this, the podcast show to talk about a specific topic. Now, usually we do a lot of interviews, but as we know, Alan's been a regular guest on the show. And I thought, what a great opportunity to get him back on the show to talk about this specific topic. The topic being relationships. Obviously, we know that business is all about relationships, growing and leading your team, all about relationships, relationships with yourself, relationships with your clients, relationships with loved ones, relationships with family. So underpinning every transaction, both physical and non-physical, emotional, monetary, there becomes a relationship. So it's an honor and a privilege to have him back on the show today. Al, thank you. Lovely for you to be here.
Well, thanks very much. And same back to you, because I always love having chats with you. We've had quite a few in the past, and they've always gone down, as you said before, different rabbit holes.
That's what we said. We're like, all right, let's get on. Let's see what rabbit hole we're going to go down today. I love it. Now the relationships. It's an interesting topic, right?
Mm.
Let's unpack it. What's your definition of relationship, of a relationship?
Well, relationships are based on communication, being able to communicate with a person in the way in which they need to be communicated with. Like we have an old saying that treat others as we would have them treat us. But when it comes to, that's fine for respect, but when it comes to communication, it's treat others and speak to others in the way in which they would have you speak to them. And so talking their language. So to build a relationship is being able to connect with somebody on their level, to be able to match them at their level, be able to connect with them and talk to them in a way in which they feel comfortable. They feel that you understand, that you're connected to them.
I love that piece around treat or communicate to others how they like to be communicated to, because so often we get it. We think that we need to communicate how we like to be communicated, but it's actually not the case, because we're all communicate differently. We all interpret communication differently. So it's the ability to actually be aware of how the other person likes to be communicated to. Where do we learn relationships?
Oh, it starts off from our early birth, because as children, Birth is going to be early, yeah, definitely. But from the moment that we're born, we're watching everybody around us. We're taking in as much as we can. We need to be able to learn to recognize people. We don't know who's who. We're seeing all these objects. What are they? And then as we spend more time with those people, we need to be able to pick up their emotions. So we're doing all of that. So those two areas, understand, recognize their facial features, recognize their facial expressions and the energy around them to know whether we're in a good place or not. And so that's where it all starts in the first place. And so then we get involved in all the different things. We want to fit in. Everybody wants to feel that to feel loved. They want to know that they have a place, that we belong, that we contribute, that we're valued. So while we're reading all these people, we're seeing where we fit into it as well. And it's all about how do we relate to them and how do they relate to us? Is there a connection? Who are the people we want to be around? So it starts that early.
And then where do you reckon it all goes wrong from there? Where do the wheels fall off? Because like we come out, we're born, right? And we have all this information being bombarded us where, as you said, like we're trying to figure out the big wide world. But where does those messages get disrupted? Where do those messages get misinterpreted? Where do then we learn, I guess, the traits of relationships and particularly communication where it can really start to fall by the wayside?
Well, it's in not being able to read the other person, not being able to understand what they really need. Because if I go back to when you and I first met, and we met with another gentleman who was more analytical like me. And I remembered while I was explaining things to him, I noticed you glazed over a couple of times. And that's because I'm analytical, Michael's analytical, and you're more big picture. You want the overview, the least amount of information you can make your decision. So with what we were talking about, we went well beyond the information you needed to know. But I had to keep talking to him that way because he was the one I was there to meet. You'd come along and that's how we connected. And so being able to recognize that in somebody, knowing what their needs are. But I knew that you have a dry wit, so I knew, and I've got a dry wit, so we'd overcome that pretty quickly. And every time we have a conversation these days, there's always lots of laughter with it as well. And so that's bringing it all together. So there's a lot of things that we need to look at. But we learn from our first birth until as we're going through our first days, we learn more and more as we go along. But then we also focus on ourselves. We want to build a relationship, so the focus goes onto us. Now, in my case, first 50 years of my life, I spent trying to build relationships for me, and then realised that I've been through 2 divorces, a lot of broken relationships, even business partners went to the bank out because I didn't know how to read them properly. But over 2 decades now, I've been working with people to help them create their relationships. And with that, as they say, you can't light someone else's path without lighting your own. And I've got more relationships and close friends and people around me that I've never had before in my life, because my last 20 years has been focused on how do I connect with the other person? How do I really focus on what they need? And how do I talk to that? How do I treat that? And once I did that, everything changed. Even my sales work changed as well, because when sales, I was trying to sell a product, not realizing that they had to buy me first. And to get to buy me, I had to build a relationship with them.
Hey guys, just a little side note here. How's it going? Are you on track this year? I know that sometimes this part of the year we can feel like we're in a bit of a grind, a bit of in the trenches. Are you on track from the original plans that you set out for the rest of this year? What I've realized is that with this time of year, we get so distracted and we've got trying to chase so many shiny balls and go down so many rabbit holes. And that's why I created a program called the 90. It's a framework that actually allows you to achieve more in 90 days than ever before. Some of the feedback that we've got from some of the people that have used the process, the 90, is that they've achieved more in 90 days than the whole previous year. So if you'd like to have the tools, have the techniques, have the framework on the 90, so you and your team can achieve more in 90 days than ever before. What it does, it impacts you of how to get clear, what you need to do, and who you need to be to show up in order to achieve the things you want to achieve over the next 90 days. Simply head over to jamesshort.com.au, click on join the waitlist, fill in your details, and one of the team members will be in touch and take you through the 90 framework. On with the show. Yep. Yeah.
And once you've
So
done
true.
that, everything else changes.
So true. And that's the thing, like we learn from the past and the ability to actually have that self-reflection and look back and go, how did that work out for me?
Yeah. Yeah.
What can I learn from that? What's the key component around that? Like
Some of us learn from our past. Some of us are a bit slower than others. And boy, was I slow.
But like for me personally, I remember so distinctly of as a young fella with my dad and stepmom like going at each other, and my dad just went vroom, and just went completely silent, and just you could see him retreat into his cave and just didn't want to communicate, and just like stonewalled, and just like, and she was just like, let's go, I want to communicate, like let's talk it out, and it was like, nope. And I remember distinctly, it's like, that's not what I want in a relationship, and it's that ability to take those lessons and go, what are those patterns that I've created over the years, and is it helping me, or is it actually hindering me? And that's where the constantly self-development and work on oneself can actually make one be aware of those key patterns and behaviors.
That's it. Well, it's about 20 years ago that I started to learn the face profiling skills that I've got today. And once I started learning those, I then looked back at those broken relationships and went, geez, I know which one of my traits were in the way there. And this is the thing, in that people are worried about what other people think of them. We're worried about, are we good enough, etc. And we really had this desperate need to be there, But I looked at it and thought, right, if I know the downside of my traits, I know why my buttons get pushed. And instead of them controlling me now without me knowing what's happening, I take dominion over them. So once I realized to put that ego side of it aside and went, right, if I want to be the best version of me, if I want to have a happier life, I need to know not just the upside of my traits, but the downside as well. What triggers me? How can I set my environment up so I don't get triggered anymore? But if I understood all that, I knew what was triggering other people as well. So I knew how to respond to them in ways in which they didn't get triggered. That perfect example of what you said about your dad and your stepmom. If one person's got the aesthetic appreciation, which will pull back into their cave, they seem to be laid back all the time, but their partner's got the dramatic appreciation and the partner is stressed out, then the aesthetic appreciation goes, oh, too much energy. Could even come across like a drama queen to the aesthetic appreciation, not to others who have the dramatic appreciation. That's just normal. But then the other way around, if the dramatic appreciation, the aesthetic appreciation goes quiet, the dramatic appreciation wants to know what's going on. And because they're not talking to them, they then start to build this thought up in their mind that, first of all, I'm worried about and I really care for them, to the point I think they're having an affair and I hate them. That's what goes on in the mind. But if you know how to talk to the other person, if the one who's pulled away goes quiet, dramatic appreciation knows to ask, is this something to do with me? No. Is something that I can do to help? No. Then, okay, I know you need to work on this on your own. I'm going to leave you alone to do that, but come and talk to me when you can. So, because I care. That way the person knows that they're just not given up, but they're giving them space. The other way around, do you want me to fix this, or do you want me to listen? And the dramatic appreciation will, if you want you to fix it, it'll be one of two reasons. One, you got the ability to fix a problem that's come up, or you screwed up in the first place and they want you to fix that. Or they just want you to listen. If you care about the other person, it's got nothing to do with you, why wouldn't you hold space for them and just let them talk and let it out?
And what I picked up from there is the quality of the questions, right? It's just like asking quality questions to gauge where that other person is at, rather than just have that assumption of like going, well, they're not talking, so therefore they're creating this story in their head of like, it's like, what context or what evidence has that story played out? Like, by asking the questions to find out, do you need help? Do you want me to fix it? Do you need
Mm.
space? Is there anything I can do to, like, that gives you then further context to find out where that other person is at. You know, I'm always a big believer the quality of the questions equals to the quality of the results. And so by
Exactly.
asking better questions, you actually identify where that other person is at. I guess that sort of leads on to a question around healthy relationships. What's some of the telltale signs of, I guess, the flip side of an unhealthy relationship? What would you deem as an unhealthy relationship, and what would be some of those signs, you reckon?
Well, when couples aren't talking to each other, especially when there's any stress or anything else going on, that they're turning away from each other. They're not having those conversations. The other party is not asking questions. And quite often, we're all emotional beings, and we've gotten even more emotional over the decades, to the point that we don't like feeling pain. So there's three levels of empathy. Cognitive, I can see you're in pain. A torturer needs that, a bully needs that, otherwise they don't get their jollies. And then we've got emotional empathy, where we feel the other person's pain. Then we can connect with them. Women are fantastic at that. But if stayed in that state long enough, then they become part of the problem, because now they take sides and it gets blown out of proportion. Whereas men, we rush in and we try and fix the thing. So we're straight into the compassionate empathy. But our compassion only starts after we try and fix it. It doesn't come in at the moment listening to the person who's got the emotional empathy going on, to actually say to it, yes, I can appreciate how you're feeling. I can see it. I can feel it. But being truthful here, I don't want to feel it either. So let's see if we can fix it. Having that little transition, but we don't. Women stop at the empathy. Men go from the compassionate. There's this line down the middle. Next thing
That
you know,
gets
it turns into a
blurred.
chasm.
Hello, 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 hello,
Exactly.
hello. So then bridging that chasm, as you've mentioned, is about coming back into those questions, coming back to, people don't want to feel pain. They don't want to feel that. What would you call it? Would it be pain, or is it uneasiness? What would you call?
Well, it varies from person to person. It depends on the subject, what it's all
Yeah.
about. It could be something that's reminding them of something really painful in their life.
Mm.
Like somebody mistreating a woman, for instance, and that woman could be feeling that she may have been through something like that herself, the one who's listening. Or it could be a male person who has had someone close to them who went through that. So theirs is going to be anger. And so it's going to shift. The emotions are going to be particular to the person and the situation.
You
But the
see,
solution to all of them is being able to read the other person and know how to talk to them in the way that they need to be spoken to.
1,000%. And I just wanted to pick up on that anger, particularly like you see and you hear it a lot in the workplace. That frustration, that anger,
Mm,
and then when you have a time frame around certain activities that need to get done, that
mm,
just exaggerates that emotion, and then expectations. So
that's
what
it.
can I guess if you're an employee listening to this, what could be some strategies if there's like anger or frustration in the workplace? Then on the other side, if you're an employer and there is some tension in the workplace, what's some of the things? Let's go strategies now. What could be some strategies that if you're an employee, how could you work with that? Or if you're an employer, how could you work with that?
Well, there's a one uh, place to start, which is universal for all of them. And that is, there are three things that we need to know. We need to understand ourselves. We need to be able to read the other person and understand where they are, so we know where we compare to them. And then that gives us a third step, which is knowing how to speak to them in the way that they need to be spoken to. If we can do that, then if you're an employee, for instance, is bullying and anger and that in the workplace, and you can read the superior officers and understand the senior officers and understand how they think and process, you now know how to actually talk to them that can then change their response to you. At the same time, if there's some uneasiness in the front lines and everything else, the executives can then, if they understand those people, can go and talk to them in the way that they need to be spoken to. They can address issues in a way in which the other person feels safe to open up. Because whenever you've got that division, there's a lack of trust, and therefore there's that people are not going to listen to somebody. They're going to have to be convinced first of all. But to convince them by telling them but you've changed, you're doing things in a different way. Well, let's face it, as we grew up, where do we learn from? What our parents told us or what we saw them do?
Yeah.
You know? We always look at, if somebody's speaking, everything sounds perfectly fine, but we get that gut feeling something's wrong because we pick up a non-verbal. Or one thing could be that they remind you of somebody who did the wrong thing by you in the past, so you just don't trust them. Or it could be that you picked up the non-verbals that say that what they're doing and the way they're moving and everything else is not matching what they're saying. And so we will always go with the non-verbals every time, and we won't trust them. Because as I always say to people, I can't hear a word you're saying because your actions are deafening. And
That's so true, right? That's
And
so
that's one
true.
thing I had to remember to be on point. If I really want to connect with people, I've got to make sure that I'm being totally truthful. And I've looked at where I'm coming from. I even look at go, okay, why do I want to create this relationship? What's the real reason I want to create it? I need to understand myself from that point of view and accept all my frailties and all my gifts and everything else equally.
Mm.
And if I can do that, then if I'm talking to somebody, nothing upsets me anymore, because I understand why I'm getting triggered. And I can then read them and go, oh, I can see why they're saying that, and put it in its right perspective.
I love that, because it's coming back to that self-awareness, coming back to those triggers. One of the things I always love is the power of the breath. We have wonderful conversations with Nat and I, my wife and I, around, the importance of breathing when we're having, courageous conversations. And as most know, she's a midwife, and she teaches
Mm.
a very amazing course called Calm Birth, which looks at that breathing, particularly, in those stages. But we take that into communication and relationships, because sometimes when you need to have those courageous conversations, the emotions come up.
Mm.
And in order to deal with that, we need to come back to that breath so we can have those communication points and
That's
and
it.
ask those questions and really connect. And as you said, like, communicate both verbal and non-verbal cues. But if you're tight and stressed and all that, and that's going to come through those cues. So coming back to the power of the breath, I think, is so important in these communication
Mm.
pieces. What would be, as we sort of come to a close with this, I mean, we could be talking for hours and hours on this topic of relationships. What would be, I guess, three powerful strategies that you could leave the audience today with, that's going to help build a healthy relationship for them personally? What would be three strategies that you would
Well, as I
recommend?
said, those 3 points: know yourself, know the other person, talk to them in the way that they need to be spoken to. But you've just mentioned another one, which was the breath. When anything happens, stop for that moment, breathe, and ask yourself, how are you going to respond to this? What are you feeling? And so you know whether it's the appropriate way to respond to that person or not. And if I often say to some people, look, I need to stop and think about this because I want to make sure I give you the accurate and best answer, and then I'll hesitate. If somebody's angry, I will always match their anger, but then I'll try and bring it back down again quickly, because I have to, first of all, acknowledge that they're angry. Otherwise, I'm just making the situation worse by going, it's okay, calm down. That's when you get a punch in the face, and rightly so, because you've disrespected the other person. You haven't acknowledged that they have a right to be angry. So recognize other people's rights to feel the way they are to start with, and not expect them to be, follow your direction all the time.
Love it. Fantastic. Alan, always an honor and a privilege to have you on the show. Guys, go and check out his website, alanstevens.com.au, and also make sure you follow him on all the social platforms. He is everywhere: LinkedIn, Facebook. Go and check it out. Follow him. He's got so much great content. And do yourself a favor and go and get yourself profiled. He's got a bunch of courses on his website. Take his courses, just immerse into his information, because the lessons, the growth, it's all around relationships, it's all around communication. So, Alan, always appreciate you. Thank you for being on the show.
Well, thanks very much. And one other thing I'll add to that is that I've taken it to a next step. I'm now creating and training my competition. So I'm looking for the people who are focused on their clients from all different industries to come to me, and that so I can train them and then work together with them to create programs they can go and teach in their industries and become the leaders in their field.
Love it. Go out and check out the website, check out his socials. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.
Thank you.